You said something that I thought was really interesting about how compensation was like a spreadsheet thing and you're a spreadsheet guy. But that is how I feel like traditional compensation management has been done, just in spreadsheets. So how has that hindered organization and companies' abilities in terms of attracting and retaining top talent if we're just living in these spreadsheets and we're potentially not looking holistically at the organization?
Yeah. So I'll start with saying why spreadsheets are good and then why they're bad. And
I love spreadsheets, to be clear.
Yeah, I am the biggest fan. It's how I built the early part of my career, so I can't say they're the worst. What I will say is that spreadsheets are great when you're building something quickly and you need full control over it. So a fast analysis, kind of something that's specifically molded to that situation, that scenario. But it's not something that can scale or, frankly, like spreadsheets are notoriously bad for collaborating. They take a lot of time to build and get it right. And you don't have the audit or access controls that you would want so that you can actually share these spreadsheets with people. What a lot of companies end up doing is saying, I built this perfect template. I am going to manually fill it out for every manager or recruiter, and then I'm going to send it out to them and share it with them. But then if you have to make an update to it, all of a sudden you may have to make it dozens of times because there are dozens of spreadsheets you've shared across the org. And you can't actually consolidate all that information very easily. There are ways you can do it with Google Sheets. It's just very, very painful and very error prone. And where you're dealing with the main source of an employee's livelihood, they don't want to know that this is how you're making those decisions. And frankly, I've met a lot of people, leaders who have so much on their plate that spending hours, days, or weeks managing spreadsheets is not the best use of their time. And so you end up opting for, well, if that's what it takes to actually do things really well, what's the faster, easier solution? Fine, do something easier. But actually that shortcut can lead to a lot of bad outcomes. So what I've seen a lot of times happen is companies just will not even adopt or build a compensation program because of the effort required to do it in spreadsheets. And that's what can lead to a lot of pay inequities. That's what can lead to a lot of instances where managers are making uninformed decisions, not because they have malicious intent, but because they've not been aided. And then here comes a new people leader or someone who finally says, okay, I'm going to initiate our comp program. I'm going to level every employee and make sure that we're not doing anything wrong. You might be hundreds of employees at this point. And like you said, 100, 200, 500 or more $1,000 to correct pay inequities, and you don't have the budget for it. So you've done the work, you realize you have broken bones in your body and there's nothing you can do about it. That's a really bad outcome to be in. And so what I would say is from the traditional compensation perspective of running things in spreadsheets, it only works when you're small enough where you can actually do things in paper and pen easily. The moment that you actually don't know all of the people, where you are involving other stakeholders in the process and you're not the sole decision maker, spreadsheets won't scale and they will break. You're under this false illusion that they will, because if you built it, you're so proud of that work. I've been there. And I'm like, this spreadsheet is fucking perfect. It has everything you need, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also the problem of, well, what if I leave? Nobody knows the ins and outs of that spreadsheet. No one ever will the way that I know it. No one will know how to make any changes to it. Or worse, they will make changes without realizing it and break the spreadsheet that was so delicately built, and now it no longer works. And I haven't even touched on the fact that this requires manual maintenance of bringing in data from different systems, whether it's your HRES, performance ratings, equity, and you may not even have access to these data sets. So you ask your counterpart, whether that's your law firm for the cap table information or your finance team, then you pull that report from your HRES. But by the time you actually updated the spreadsheet, it's obsolete. Things have changed. Employees have quit, or they've been moved from one department to the other, or they received the raise. And so you're operating in a very high risk tool with stale data and making really important decisions that affect every employee as well as the business. I just don't think it's the way of the future. And when you look at other similar business processes across the companies, nobody's doing those things in spreadsheets. But compensation, I think partly because it's seen as a cost center, has always, it hasn't been giving enough budget for you to actually do things the right way.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I would love a compensation tool, but then if I have to lobby for that budget over potentially other tools that are going to help the organization and other maybe more impactful teams, not saying that HR is not the most impactful team, but in some people's eyes, there are teams that are more impactful who need that budget for something else. I feel like it's so cutthroat when you're trying to get that approval. But the reality is, like you just described, a very real day-to-day for a lot of HR people where they're manually updating Google Sheets and then wondering like, oh, well, why are my offers not being accepted? Or why do we have high attrition? Why do people keep leaving? And at the core of it, and they've done all these studies over like why people leave companies, compensation ends up being almost always the number one reason.
Yeah.
I think there's like 1 year during the pandemic where it was like the second reason and the first reason was like growth, but it's because growth is also associated with compensation.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing something like a one-off that doesn't actually scale, it's painful for you. I guarantee you it's like also painful for the employees, and they're feeling the impact as well of like traditional compensation management. Not to mention the inconsistencies, like, and having not a non-transparent compensation practice. So